Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode of Triple Tap Tuesday. This is episode number 41. Can you believe that, guys? I just would like to welcome Kent and Kim to the call with me this evening. How are you both?
Kim,
Oh,
you take
amazing.
it.
That's good.
Thanks, Ken. Amazing this week.
What have you had?
What
have you done that's been so amazing this week, Kim?
Tell all the third nation. We have the third sovereign nation up and running now, which is Birri-Gubba up in central Queensland. We officially became a nation on the 8th of March and formed government on Saturday, the 11th of March. So very, very exciting. There's lots of plans on the table to move forward with this and start to undo some of the damage. And we're getting started straight away.
That's
fantastic.
So exciting. And I know you've worked so super hard on that. And I know you've got more others that you're working in the wings. So a huge congratulations to you and the Birri-Gubba tribe. I know this is certainly very exciting to see. So thank you so much for all your hard work that you've done with them over the last few months. It's been really exciting to watch, and we're really grateful and appreciate you having you on board.
Thanks, Anne.
Kent, what's your week been like?
Well, my week has been the same as everyone else's. It's been immersed in the very, very strange goings on that go on in this world, like banks collapsing all over the place, hundreds of billions of dollars racing around, the president of the United States of America just talking rubbish and lies everywhere, the Prime Minister of Australia just, it's like someone's got a tap that they turn on the side and the guff just comes out his mouth. He's in the paper trying to tell everyone that the submarines is a good thing. I want to know who is going to jail over the hundreds of billions that have been sorted prior to this, and what now he's fixed it. He's come in as some savior and he's going to fix it, and the submarines are going to work. But I want to know who's going to jail over the terrible botch up job for the rest of it. I've been working on my house. I'm trying to get the fourth. I desperately want to be the person who works and gets the fourth nation up and running.
Hopefully that will be You're in a race.
I'm in a race with Jeff. And I hope, you know what, I hope he beats me, and I also hope I beat him. So whoever gets there first, it's fantastic. It's and our guest tonight. I'm excited about.
Don't reveal him.
No, I won't.
Don't reveal him.
Well, I'm excited about our guest tonight, so it's going to be yeah.
I always like to do that little bit. I always like to keep everybody in suspense until the very last moment. I've got a little bit of something different tonight, how I'm going to present our speaker this evening. I'm about to screen share again because I put a little presentation together on this man. And you're probably wondering why I'm not dressed up as normal. I've got my Gracie Barra. I dug this one out of the archives. I can't believe it still fits me because tonight we are speaking about someone who is involved in some martial arts. I was sharing my story with him this afternoon that at one stage I actually had a chance to learn some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and in 2009 I did actually go to Brazil. My Jiu-Jitsu instructor at the time was very, very jealous because it was a very, very small personal development training. And one of the private sessions we had there was with a man called Rickson Gracie, who is world renowned for leading the Gracie Barra movement. And because I'd done a little bit of training, he chose me to be the person that he used in front of the class. And we sort of got to do some learning and whatnot of more Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that was my one and only time with someone who was world famous in Jiu-Jitsu. Had a lot of fun. So I'm really excited to introduce our speaker tonight. So let me just do a quick screen share and we will get underway. Hopefully you guys can see that. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah. Fantastic.
So this is such a cool shot. And of course, you can now see that we're introducing none other than Father Dave Smith. And I'm just going to do a little promo on him before we invite him onto the call. So Father Dave Smith, known as Fighting Father, grew up in Newtown. He completed an arts degree in philosophy and 2 theology degrees before being appointed parish priest at the Anglican Church in Dulwich Hill in December 1990. Dave has 4 children, Veronica, Imogen, Soren Lee, and Francesca. Dave is best known for his work with troubled youth. Father Dave's Fight Club started in 1991 with a focus on getting young people off the gear, i.e. heroin, and into the ring. Trinity's Youth Centre opened in the church hall in 1994, providing a safe place for young people after school, and only closed in 2018 when the streets of Dulwich Hill were deemed to be safe. In 2002, Dave established Binacrombie, a remote facility in the heart of the Australian bush, as a centre for both prayer and combat sports training for young people. And I noticed when I saw this on the website, if any of you know the movie Eat, Pray, Love, this is kind of like Ride, Fight, Play. So Binacrombie, Ride, Fight, Play. He runs regular warrior weekend camps at Binacrombie, aimed at teaching both physical and spiritual fitness, and increasingly at developing social integration between Muslim and non-Muslim youth. Much of Dave's energy is indeed focused on interfaith and social justice work, and he has built close ties with the Shia Muslim community in Sydney and works hard at trying to combat Islamophobia and anti-Arab prejudice. He's also been an outspoken advocate of the Palestinian cause and was president of Friends of Sabeel Australia from 2012 to 2021. Father Dave is regularly featured on both Australian and international media, being consulted on subjects as disparate as interfaith work, boxing, youth violence, drug addiction, peace advocacy, the Syria crisis, and the Christian gospel. He has also been the subject of several short films. Father Dave has been involved in the Syrian crisis in 2013 and made 9 trips into Syria since then, founding the Boxers for Peace program in 2014. Dave has twice been named Marek Citizen of the Year in 1994 and 2009, and 3 times nominated for Australian of the Year. He has numerous boxing titles and black belts in martial arts. So you can see why I really wanted to wear my Gracie Barra shirt tonight. In 2012, he set the Guinness World Record for the greatest number of consecutive rounds of boxing. And he is currently Australia's oldest professional fighter ever. So Father Dave is also, and this is 2 books you might want to look up after this. I've just done some research on 2 books, one called Sex, the Ring and the Eucharist, which is a reflection of life, ministry and fighting in the inner city. It's a little book there, even though they say the book, like the author, is hard-hitting and straight talking. The language will shock some, and others will be put off by Dave's criticism of the established church and the legal system that is at points quite savage. So we really look forward to speaking to him tonight about that. And yet there is a very pervading sense of faith and hope running through this book that is inescapable and infectious. So you might want to have a look at that one, and we'll hopefully get to talk to Father Dave tonight about that. And the other book that he's written is called Christians and Muslims Can Be Friends, and how do we separate identity from belief and recover our humanity? Father Dave probes the Christian scriptures to show how Jesus taught us to move beyond us and them to discover the humanity of the other. He then illustrates the way forward in a series of interviews with Muslim friends, demonstrating that we don't need to agree on everything before we can embrace each other as sisters and brothers. And at a time when Christians and Muslims sorely need to work together to solve the world's problems, we are too often paralyzed by fear and suspicion. So this book aims to help us move beyond fear to mutual respect, love, and of course, genuine friendship. So I'm going to leave it there. I think, yep, I've got 2 more slides, which I'll share a bit later on in the interview. But it is now my time to very, very warmly welcome, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let us invite Father Dave Smith to the call. Welcome, Father Dave. Lovely to be here.
Thank you. I'm surprised my head still fits in the picture with that introduction. That was very gracious.
Well, you've done so much in your life, like you have, like when I read through these bios and I attempt to make them short, when you've done as much in your life as you can, sometimes it's really, really hard to shorten the bios down to something small. And I think you've done so much, it's definitely worth mentioning. So tell us a little bit about, apart from that, where are you at now? And what are you working on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because I was squeezed out of the church a couple of years ago. I was never a comfortable fit with the established church, I'm afraid. I mean, I think they liked the good reputation I had, but they didn't like a lot of things I was saying and doing. It's the way it goes. So I'm not in sort of proper paid employment anymore. I'm sort of scratching away, trying to push. I'm still trying to do what I'm called to do, you know, so I'm still running a boxing club. I'm still working with people on the edge. I'm still trying to run the camps out in the bush. And, you know, people are supporting me, and I'm deeply grateful for that. I'm doing an online weekly Eucharist each week, you know, on a Sunday midday, which people are participating in, and that's become my sort of spiritual community now, and I'm deeply grateful for that. So by the grace of God, I'm pushing forward, trying to do what I feel called to do, rather than just crawling away and slowly dying. And yeah, life continues at a pace. And I guess a lot of the emphasis now has been, particularly since the, well, so much has gone crazy in the world. The week I had to leave my position in the parish was the week of the first lockdown. And yeah, I guess in a sense, that's given me a whole new focus and direction, trying to offer some sort of spiritual resources to people in the resistance movement, or however you put it. And I guess that's become a major focus for me. And also, I think, you know, the fact that I've always been dealing with people on the edge, finding a lot of those people being pushed over the edge by lockdowns and things like that. It's, yeah, opened up a whole new avenue of work for me, which has been intense and difficult and stressful, but I'm in good company.
On the whole, do you think generally in your people in your area that you're working with, how are people coping with everything that's going on? And now in the last week, we've had the news around the world that some of the banks are starting to collapse in the US, which we know will have a flow-on effect here. We've had the New York Stock Exchange halt trading on Monday morning. Even before they opened the trading floors, a lot of the banks were crashing. So as soon as they opened, there was a halt on all those banks. That's surely going to have a flow-on effect over here. There's already whispers. People are like, what do I do with my money? What's your feeling of how are people coping over on the East?
My feeling is that people are still living in denial at this stage to a large extent. I think the expectation was that the COVID thing will pass and life will go back to normal. And I think people are still buying that if things aren't quite back to normal, it's just around the corner and things are returning to normal. And yeah, there's some of us who are saying that it will probably never return to normal. But it's very hard to break a dominant narrative, you know, and yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit yet before people break with the dominant narrative.
Do you think it's going to take them losing funds in their bank accounts and things like that for them to really start waking up and realizing the reality of what's going on?
I think 100%. Yeah, I think that's where it will hit people, you know, either that or with the excess deaths and things, you know, when it reaches a point where everybody has someone in their family, you know, there'll be a tipping point, but I think it's a little way off yet.
I think so. We can't hear you, Kate. I think you're right, Father Dave. I just want to say I absolutely love what you do, and I think it's wonderful, all the different programs that you've set up all over the in time and in different locations as well. So I think COVID changed a lot for everyone. I know it definitely did for me as well, and I'm very, very grateful for that, because it actually has brought for me the opportunity to step into what I feel like I should have always been doing, or this is the time that we were kind of born for. Are you finding the same thing, that little coincidences are always happening, synchronicities are coming on board now, where it's actually directing your path in which way you need to go and what you need to do, which is a betterment for humanity in whatever that way looks like?
Yeah, I think I'm still crawling my way forward. You know, they say when any transition takes place, there's a letting go, there's a wandering through the wilderness, and then there's a grabbing on to what's ahead, you know. And I think I found it very hard to let go. I was 30 years as a parish priest in Dalit Shil, and that was a community I sort of lived and bled for 30 years. And it's been very hard to just let go of that. And, you know, so I've been sort of wandering through my wilderness for a little while, but I find it's been populated with hurting people. And yeah, and I've definitely got, and look, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now, particularly in terms of the way I was responding to the lockdowns and things like that, if I was in the position I was in, because I would not have had the support of the established church. Well, I didn't. I already had the bishop telling me to take stuff off. And then he kicked me out, so I put it back up, you know. Yeah, so I think it's been serendipitous. You know, I think God's got a way in this of moving people where he wants people to be. It's just often very painful and difficult, the process. But, you know, it's a fight. It is a fight.
I think too, what you do find though in this, and this is one of the beautiful things that you having gone through this experience, it's what you can pass on to the kids, a lot of the kids that you're working with as well, is that once you go through that pain, you walk through fire, you come out the other side and you're steel. And you've had those lessons and you can bring those life lessons into your everyday living. And that's a beautiful process. Even though the pain is there, the other side as you walk through is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, look, it takes its toll.
It does.
And we don't want to minimize the effect that might have on me or any number of people. As I say, I work with a lot of people on the edge, and I've seen a lot of people push over the edge. I've seen a lot of suicides in the last few years. You know, some of us don't make it. But
some of us don't. No.
Yeah, those of us that do, yeah, we come through stronger.
So how are you coping, Father Dave? You personally, how are you coping with it all? It's
a good question, Ainsley. To be quite honest, the boxing has always been a very therapeutic thing for me. Not unnecessarily obvious why, just the form of catharsis maybe, but I think it's also a form of engagement with my brothers and sisters to a lesser extent, a form of, and the way we do it here, the way I train people, it's not about smashing each other up. It's about, you know, pushing each other, rough play with each other, and bringing the best out of each other. I find that sort of intense form of engagement. I mean, I do it a lot. And it keeps me balanced.
Maybe that's why I originally had a go at the Gracie Barrow. It was almost like bringing out the tomboy side of me, because at the time when I joined, I was the only girl in the class. It was very, very daunting, I must say. But, you know, I was the worst person to do roly-polies, I can tell you.
Well, you're a bit of a legend yourself, having rolled with Hickson. I mean, not many people can claim that.
Yeah.
You know, Hickson, Wes Gracie, these guys were the founders of modern day MMA, you know.
Yeah.
I never got to roll with any of those guys. I did with some pretty high up guys, and I did run an MMA organisation at one stage, the first one that was registered in New South Wales.
Oh, wow.
But that was back in the early 90s, long time ago now.
I'm going to have to go and dig out those photos. I'm going to have to dig out those photos somewhere that I was telling you about.
It's interesting. We moved away from all of that because it was just, from my perspective, too violent. And which might sound odd, you know, I teach boxing, but in the MMA all went to UFC, if you know what that is, and that's just too brutal. Yeah. You know, we're trying to get the kids out of fights and out of the street, not into more. And yeah, the kickboxing all went to Muay Thai with knees and elbows and things. So we found boxing really was the only safe form of pugilism left. I know it doesn't sound safe, but really amateur boxing, at least, and professional boxing, you get paid, you take your life in your hands, you know what you're doing. But amateur boxing, it's generally mums and dads and kids, you know, and it's got a great safety record.
Do you have many
that's
women?
All my emphasis is now.
Do you have many women and young girls in the classes?
Yeah, it's always about 1 in 10.
Okay.
But ironically, it's often the girls who are the most successful in terms of as athletes. I think there's a reason for that. I think most boys who want to fight learn to fight is because they're angry. And we help them get over their anger issues. With the girls who want to fight, it's generally because they're interested in it as a sport. So they get good and they get better. The boys, they come to terms, they face their demons, they get over it, and they often move on. And that's a good thing. So obviously I haven't moved on, so I haven't dealt with all of mine yet.
Kent, did you have any questions for Father Dave?
Yeah,
Sorry?
I do. Yeah, I do. That's okay, mate. I'm Ainsley. I might have a little bit of an unstable connection here at the moment, but you guys are hearing me okay, I take it at the moment. So
Yeah, yep.
Father Dave, look, you're no stranger to pain in your personal life, and you deal with a lot of people who've been overcome by pain and they don't know how to rationalize that and turn that into a strength. I was a police officer for 20 years. I've dealt with a lot of suicide, and during the COVID lockdowns, it might interest you to know that, and you probably already do know this, the suicide rate went to 20 times, 20 times, because people couldn't get out and they couldn't engage with life.
Extraordinary the extent to which they denied that in the official level. We kept being told the suicide rate hasn't gone up, and I said, I think I'd already knew 8 people by that stage, which is more than I'd known in the last 20 years. It was,
yeah, well,
terrible.
I got my statistics from Queensland police officers who are working in the missing person unit and were tasked with suicides right across the state. So the official figures, they were dealing with, on average, approximately one person every couple of days, and like one person every 1 or 2 days across the state before the lockdowns. During the lockdowns, that went to reached heights of up to 20 people per day.
For God's sake.
Yes. It was dreadful.
Wow.
Look,
I mean, even in my boxing club, I had one boy who he went to see his dad and found his dad had hanged himself. This was early in the first lockdown.
Yeah.
And out where our bush camp was, it was much more prevalent out in the country, even than in the inner city. I think people alone. It was just it took a terrible toll. And as I say, but by perhaps serendipitously, that was the same week I was squeezed out of the church, and it hit me really hard. And I thought, if it's hitting me like this, how's it hitting those who are right on the edge? I've got good support. I've got good spiritual resources. What about those who are right on the edge? And sure enough, so I was working with those guys, supporting them as closely as I could, mainly guys. I remember taking one guy out to the bush camp one weekend. We get stopped by the police and harassed halfway down. We weren't wearing our face masks in the car, for God's sake. I mean, he was then almost, I had to take him home and find he couldn't continue. Just the whole system seemed to be designed to destroy people who are struggling.
Look, there's no two ways about that. I'm just curious where you're at this point in time, with so much information coming out now that the government is very likely heavily complicit in perpetuating a crime upon its own people purely for financial gain, and also to bring about this so-called Great Reset, where once again, their plan is for people to not be allowed to travel more than 15 minutes from their home if they've blown their carbon amount. Where are we headed? Where are we headed? And how do you feel our government can change and try to, is there a way to talk with them? They don't seem to be listening.
It's a very good question, brother. I mean, I know Anthony Albanese. I've been friends with him for 20 years, more. I mean, I haven't seen him since he became Prime Minister. I was running against him in the last election. He did shake my hand. But I know he's a very decent bloke. But, at that level, do you have any freedom? I don't know. I'd hate to think he could be partisan to seeing that happen. I don't know.
I've
But I do believe that in his heart, it's not where he wants to go. I mean, I don't know him well enough to know that. I think it's just what are the forces that are on him and on the government nationally and internationally? I've got no idea.
That's a very interesting perspective. See, personally, because I don't come from your perspective of getting to talk with the man, and I know that you haven't spoken to him since he became Prime Minister, but being quite a serious person, and I am, there's no two ways about that, and being a person who believes in the rule of law, and having watched our government and the type of silliness that they perpetuated, I'm extremely confident that the laws were there to stop the lockdowns. In fact, there was a massive duty and a responsibility to stop those lockdowns. They were unlawful according to the Crimes Act, according to the Constitution. And all Scott Morrison had to do was to say, look, unfortunately, I can see why the states want to do this, but the fact is these types of actions are unlawful. And if you as state premiers bring about these lockdowns, you will be committing crimes. Now, those crimes were, and those laws were well made by our ancestors and our forebears in this country to keep us safe and to keep our freedoms and keep democracy rolling along well and strong. But neither as the member for the opposition or Scott Morrison as the Prime Minister chose to do anything about it. I mean, nearly 3 million people turned up in Canberra, 3 million Australians.
Yeah. Oh, I remember.
Right. And they chose to ignore us.
Yeah, I had the privilege of opening prayer at that rally, and I will go to my grave remembering that moment. It was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. The first time, I don't remember feeling so proud to be Australian. It was quite an absolutely extraordinary moment in our history, I think.
Oh, it was. It definitely was an extraordinary moment. We now have the leader of our country giving millions and millions of dollars, and I don't begrudge millions of dollars going from Australia to help special interest groups, LGBTQ, etc. But I wonder if the phrase charity begins at home means anything to our current day leaders when, we have terrible catastrophes, floods, people trapped in roofs, sadly, people dying, losing their lives. And the leader of the opposition then, Mr. Albanese and Mr. Scott Morrison, basically turn a blind eye, but they're prepared to send billions to a war and hundreds of millions to special interest groups. What's going on?
Yeah, look, there's a very twisted narrative which is controlling these things. I mean, I'm more familiar with it at certain points than others. In terms of the war, I'm very familiar with the narrative about Syria, having been there so many times, and the way that's been twisted and the way people are being destroyed there, literally lives being destroyed and the whole country being torn apart by lies. And yes, I remember when we invaded Ukraine, I said, well, they didn't tell us the truth about Iraq or about Libya or about Syria or about, or about Vietnam or about, but I'm sure they're telling the truth this time.
Oh, no. Oh, no, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Why do we assume they're telling the truth this time? I'm not saying I know the truth in that case. I'm sure I always think every complex problem has a simple answer, and it's always the wrong answer. You've got to do the hard work, and people like to paint things in blacks and whites, and there are nuances and complexities to these things. And I'm not wanting to say the rule on what's happening in Ukraine but it is complex, I think.
It is
and
complex.
To try and simplify it and to paint it like good versus evil is just puerile, I think, and very destructive.
What's the way forward, Father?
God.
Well, for certain, it's God. There's no two ways about that. But we're going to have to put plans into action. And I wonder if Father Dave's got some plans that he thinks could, do good for Australia and bring us together.
It's a really good point, and it's something I'm still working my way through. But for what it's worth, I look at in the Hebrew Bible, leadership was divided between prophets, priests, and kings. Forgive me giving a roundabout answer, but there were different ways of showing leadership in a crisis. The king was the guy who sort of made policies and pushed forward, and there's that role. The other role, the prophet, was the one who just told the truth and took it in the chin when he got belted up for it. And the priest was the guy who was trying to offer the spiritual resources to the people to keep going. I see my role as being in that latter capacity, trying to equip people and support them and pray for them and give them the spiritual resources to keep going. I don't see myself as, despite the fact that I ran against Albo in the last election, I don't really see myself as the sort of political leader who's going to be able to push forward with those sorts of policies. Maybe there's a bit of the prophet in me. I like to speak the truth, even when it's unpopular. But I think that the role of how we push forward exactly takes a lot of hard thinking and a lot of people in collaboration who've got that sort of nous. I'm not sure I'm the person with the nous to
Father Dave,
use.
How important do you believe our local communities getting together and supporting each other? We obviously have a lot of TAP satellite groups all around Australia who've been working over the last 3 years, getting together with their communities, supporting in business and education, in food growing co-ops, in like all sorts of different things. How important do you believe those communities will become in the next 12, 18 months, 2 to 3 years?
Look, I think it's absolutely vital that we keep a sense of local, real, tangible community happening. One of the things the lockdown did was it stopped us connecting with each other in real and tangible ways. I think the Hebrew word for skin, bazar, the idea is that it's what makes you human, because we can touch each other. And if we can't touch each other, the implication is we're not fully human. And I think that's true. And I think that's why, I love the combat sports, particularly training in them, because I love the touch and rumble and that sort of real human engagement, and I think there's no substitute for that, for real, tangible community. I think there's certain things we can do as a virtual community online like this. Yes, absolutely, it's vital and important, but we've got to keep the real, tangible, local community going and people connecting and people, in touch literally with each other. I think it's vital to our spirituality as well as to our attempt to form, cooperative blocks.
Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got any questions for Father Dave, please do pop them in the chat box there, and we will have the opportunity to ask Father Dave throughout the next half hour of this segment. Father Dave, I'd just like to shift gears a little bit, and if you could just maybe talk a little bit about your books that you've written.
Oh, yeah. I could talk all day about them.
Well, we only have 30 minutes, and I do want to also ask you about share a very important event that you're going to be speaking at coming up at the end of next month. But let's talk about first the book. So I'm just going to quickly flick back to my screen share so that people can see. Let's talk about this first book, Sex, the Ring, and the Eucharist.
Yeah. I mean, the title's taken from the final chapter of the book. If you're familiar with the philosopher Martin Buber, a great Jewish philosopher, who spoke of the I and the thou, the point at which we genuinely engage with another person. For me, sex, the ring, and the Eucharist, like in terms of engagement with my partner, engagement with my brother, engagement with my God, that sort of real I, thou, me, you experience. That's, for me, they're like the sort of the three legs of the stool, if you like, points at which I touch base with my partner, with my brother, with my God, so that was the point of the book. And I guess it was outlining what we did in Dulwich Hill over the first 20 years there, when we were the heroin capital of the inner west, working with kids and using the boxing as a way of engaging with young people and helping them deal with their anger management issues and deal with their drug issues. And, there was a lot of crazy stuff happened in that 20 years and we lost a lot of people, but we had a lot of fun too.
It talks about in that review or in that little intro of that book that some of people might be put off by your criticism of the legal system. Can you just explain what issues you have there with the legal system and, what interactions have you had?
Look, there was a time when I was in the juvenile court every week. I was down at the juvenile lockup 2-3 times a week. I was in court every week, sometimes supporting kids, sometimes as witness against them. There were the system seemed to be designed sometimes to make things worse. At the time, the worst part I remember was that if you were 16, that you could, and you were there, so in your first offence, normally by people in their first offence, they've been using drugs for a little while in our context, and then they eventually get caught, and then they get caught a couple of times before it actually goes to court. So they're right on the edge of becoming addicts by the time they go to court. And generally, that you weren't allowed to inform their parents if they were 16, between 16 and 18, and they could have another adult there. And they were, the system seemed to be designed to get them to become addicts, I felt. And anyway, we worked with others to try and get some changes there. But we saw so many terrible decisions in court too, both of decent kids getting railroaded, but also of absolute villains just sort of being let off as well. So, yeah, there were lots of problems with the way it was dealt with legally, and particularly because of the failure to involve the families. That was my feeling.
What about this one?
Yeah, I'm very proud of that picture on the front there. That's the Grand Mufti of Syria in the middle there. That's me just on the right. And if you look close, he's holding my hand, which I always loved with that. I remember when that photo was taken, I looked down and realized he was holding my hand. He's an amazing man, Dr. Ahmed Badr al-Hinnasun. His son was killed right at the beginning of the violence there, and he preached forgiveness at the funeral. I remember when I brought my son to meet him, he said my son reminded me of his son. He was only young, 16 or 17 or something like that. And he prayed for forgiveness for the people who killed him. And they caught two of those men a year later. I remember he actually asked the judge to forgive them. It was, I've never seen such an example of Christian humility in a man who's not Christian. And he wrote the foreword for the book, so I'm very proud of that. Extraordinarily gracious man. And what can I say? It was...
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested in any of these books, you can certainly just there's some, obviously the titles we'll put when we put the replay up, but you can certainly Google these titles, and there are a number of bookstores that these are available on that you can look up and go and grab your copy of these books, and hopefully Father Dave will get some proceeds from those books. I don't know how much.
Oh, that would be lovely. We'll see. I'm really keen to get that sort of book into the hands of more people in churches, to try and break down prejudices and build cooperation. Because I think if we're going to move forward, we need people of faith to work together. I think that's an important point actually to make, because I think if we look at successful social revolutions in the last generation or two, I think if we think of the Indian independence movement under Mahatma Gandhi, or the civil rights movement under Martin Luther King, or the anti-apartheid movement under Nelson Mandela, or even the Iranian Revolution 1979 under Ayatollah Khomeini, peaceful in its inception. All these great social movements had a faith basis to them. It was about tapping into the spirituality of the people. And that's what made them work, and that's what made them peaceful, and that's what made them long lasting. And I think from my angle, that's what we need to do here. We need to tap into the faith, not necessarily just the Christian faith, but the spirituality of the people. And I've seen that happening in this country in a way in which I never expected. And it's been extremely gratifying and encouraging to see people of a Christian faith, a Muslim faith, an Indigenous faith, all sorts of faith perspectives coming together, and as part of a great movement, and I think that's something we've been caught up in.
Well, I love that you use the word tap and say that we need to tap into that, because obviously we're the Australia Project and our nickname is TAP.
Well, there you go.
Father,
serendipitous, brother.
Father, I also love that you've been witnessing this regrowth and this resurgence of faith.
Yes,
I think perhaps it might have always been there, but we need we need tough times to bring it out and
Look,
get us to speak openly.
I think you might be right, Kenton. I know a lot of people were saying that Australia was targeted, globally because we don't have the faith resources compared to other countries.
I can tell you that's wrong.
Yeah, if that was the case, that they underestimated us.
I think they have. I think they have underestimated us. I can tell you right now, the work that TAP is heavily engaged in is promoting faith across all walks of life. And Father, we are busting our backsides off, working every moment of the day we possibly can to unite Australians with our Aboriginal Australians, looking to their sovereignty, to their rights to govern and lead their own land. And we are joining with them. And it's having a massive effect. If you had have told me 2 years ago that the people we'd be working with would see us in meetings with Antonio Guterres and having the UN so happy and so proud of the work that's moving forwards with the Australian Aboriginals, with them reclaiming their land, reclaiming their sovereignty. It's an amazing, humbling work that we're engaged in.
Well, I'm really encouraged to hear that, brother. I must tell you, last Saturday, we had a smoking ceremony out at Bittercrombie. That's our bush camp. And I had two elders out there who are also both Christian pastors. And we spent an hour doing the smoking ceremony and praying and singing. And I tell you what, it was so intense. I still haven't recovered my energy, to tell you the truth. I was lucky to get 3 more rounds of boxing tonight. But it was just an extraordinary experience, and deeply grateful for those men and for the reality that was brought to us through that ceremony. So I think there's a lot here which we're tapping into at a spiritual level. I think it's outside of the established church, though, and I think there's a lot of disillusionment, understandable disillusionment, with the established church. But yeah, from my angle, the Spirit of God's alive and well.
Excellent. Father David, I just want to bring attention to our listeners. You're involved in another event coming up at the end of next month, and I've just got that up on the screen now for people to see. It's called Down the Rabbit Hole, and it's a ball. It's in Epping Club, New South Wales, and you're one of the guest speakers there with Professor Gigi Foster. So
yeah,
looking
it's
forward
fantastic.
to that. Yeah. And I believe this is raising funds for Father Dave's Fighting Fathers Ministries. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Well, that's what we do, so that's the boxing club, that's the bush camp, that's the Sunday Eucharist, that's the online work which we do. And truth is, as I say, I'm not in paid employment anymore. It's very hard to keep it all going. So any assistance we can get will be deeply appreciated.
Excellent.
And the Epping Club, and is it Gigi or Gigi, or how do we pronounce Dr. Foster's first name?
Is it Gigi Foster? Professor Gigi Foster?
That sounds good to me.
Cool.
Okay.
If any of our listeners are out there and you'd like to get tickets to the Down the Rabbit Hole Ball, I believe they are $120 per person for a table of, you can get tables of 10. Tickets are online through trybooking.com. We will put the link up on the replay of this, and I believe the event is also on our website. You can go to www.theaustraliaproject.org and go to our events calendar for the 29th of April, and you will see a link to that event up there that you can then go and find and grab a table of 10, go down, support the work that Father Dave is doing in his ministries, both out there, all the boxing, and also, what was the name of that club again? The Bittercrombie. You want to tell us
we'd love to
more
have
about Bittercrombie?
Yeah, I'm really keen to see Bittercrombie as a place where we can equip people, and I like to run camps out there for kids, but I think we could run camps out for people of all ages, you know what I mean? Spiritual health and fitness, as well as physical health and fitness. I think for some reason I'm fitter than I've ever been in my life at the moment. I'm 61. I don't know whether I'm going to try and break my own world record on the mountains of boxing, but I think I'd be just about up to it. I'm looking for another fight at the moment. If anyone knows anyone who'd be willing to fight me, it's really hard because this combat sports people won't let me fight people half my age. So I'm trying to get a fight though at the moment. I'm in great shape, but I do think I can in a good position to support people, to help them with their physical health, and with their spiritual resources. We do a fantastic thing when we go out the camp, a combination of intense physical engagement and absolute silence and monastic chanting.
Is it for any age, Father Dave? Like, is there a certain age group that you're doing this for, or because
I say traditionally I've worked with teenagers and up, but yeah. I'm really keen to work with just more adult people and people who are sort of feeling spiritually, who are struggling, in the movement, and just trying to help give them the resources to keep going physically and spiritually. I mean, I think most of us are probably big on vitamins and all that sort of stuff, which I'm also big on. But, obviously I sort of give people support in getting their diet right and their vitamin supplements right and getting their health 100%, but also through the use of prayer and monastic chanting and plenty of boxing.
I'd love to know a little bit more about what these warrior weekends are like. I did some warrior.
Yeah, well, this is it. I'd love to have you out for a weekend. Seriously, if you can make it out, anyone here.
Yeah.
You can come, make a donation if you can, but if you can't, just come. And I will spend the weekend with you, mentoring you, teaching you breathing exercises, praying, taking a dip in the icy cold Billabong if it's in winter. Well, okay, no component is compulsory, but generally what we do for the kids and what I'd like to do for anyone is intense activity, and pushing your body to extremes, and at the same time balancing that with monastic chanting, prayer, breathing exercises, and the use of silence.
I've just
Father Dave, I'm going to. Sorry, Ainsley. I'm butting in it, Father Dave. I'm going to take you up on that. Okay.
Thank you.
And I will make a donation. I'll make a donation. We'll sort that out. But I'm going to take you up on that. I have learnt.
Thank you.
I've learnt through my life that it's at the edge of human endurance and in the depths of mental focus that we learn our greatest lessons. And we learn skills to cope with life. So I'd be very, very keen to take you up on that. I'll be in touch.
Look, I'm excited by that, Kent. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really feeling in terms of my calling at the moment that is a key part of it, to allow people to come out there, show them hospitality and support them and resource them through that place. So I'm there every other weekend, and we touch base, we work out a date, we do it together, we make it work.
Cool.
Wow, I'll be there.
I've got a couple of questions for you, Father Dave, from our listeners, but while I ask you those questions, you answer that. Viewers, if you are listening and looking at the screen tonight, I've just got, because we have so many areas that you can get in contact with Father Dave, I'm just going to leave that screenshot up for a while.
The only problem with that screenshot, Ainsley, is it's missing out the one which is my main one now, which is the SundayEucharist.com, where I'm trying to get people together on a Sunday for prayer. So
if you send that to me, Father Dave, if you send that to me, Father Dave, we'll put that on the replay for you, and that way they won't miss out.
That would be good, because we'd love to connect with more people on a Sunday through the Eucharist, which is
okay, cool.
I see that as a key spiritual resource.
Okay, so one of our questions for one of our listeners, he's got two questions. I'll ask one at a time. We've got a lot of information that vaccines, COVID-19, so-called vaccine bioweapons, were designed to control and to decrease population by harming. We know that a lot of people were injured and killed by these jabs. In your opinion, Albanese or Morrison, do you think they were aware about that?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. I know Anthony well enough to say he's not a malicious person. I don't know Scott Morrison at all, never met him. But Anthony is a good man. And I do not believe he would knowingly have been engaged in something which he knew was going to damage people. But
can we be deceived by people who put on a good show that we think we know them, and perhaps You know,
Well, clearly we can, but I'm pretty confident that what Father Dave's saying is he knows him well enough that his opinion of him is that he wouldn't deliberately try and hurt anyone.
That's correct.
I'm not, Father Dave. I'm not saying I believe that.
Yeah.
However, I know that's clearly what you're saying. Yes.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, I got
that's
that
what I'm
message.
saying.
Yeah. So the second question from the same person is, does the last 2 years of the COVID scandemic change your world outlook and the relations between the population and the governments, or was this a bit of a surprise for you?
Sorry, can you repeat that one, Ainsley?
Does the last 2 years of the COVID scandemic, has it changed your world outlook and relations between, I guess, the population and governments, do you think? Or was it a bit of a surprise for you?
Has it changed my outlook?
Hmm.
I mean, look, I've always seen life as a fight, you know. I think in some ways it's sort of become more obvious that in terms of the spiritual dimensions of the battle we're fighting, I think that's sort of become more clear. You know, good and evil have become more prominent. We've seen the dark face of the government, I think, in a way in which we never have. You know, I always thought our government was relatively beneficent, but we saw its dark side, and that's always been there. And you know what St. Paul says, we battle with principalities and powers ultimately. And I think some of those have shown their face more clearly in the last couple of years. But they were always there.
They were always there.
They've just come out of hiding.
Go ahead, Kim. I know you're.
You know, the fight goes on. It's the same fight.
Yeah.
It is, and I think we've seen this battle many times over history, haven't we? It's just a repeat of even World War II in particular,
Yes.
for this particular one.
In many ways, the stakes are higher.
In many ways, they are. It's on a much, much broader scale because it's worldwide this time.
Exactly. And, you know, the possibility of nuclear obliteration and all that sort of thing is very real. Mind you, that's been real for more than a generation. And if you've read Daniel Ellsberg's book on the Doomsday Device, which I thought was excellent, he points out how many times we've come right close to the edge, you know, but by the grace of God, we keep coming back from that edge. But yeah, the dark forces have come forward in other ways in the last couple of years.
Oh, they have, in a big way.
Not in hiding anymore.
One thing I'm very grateful for moving forwards in our future is that the people generally, like the little town of Boonah that I live near here in southeast Queensland, they're banding together. They're having, they're growing, you know, they're growing their unity. They're beginning to understand, Father Dave, they're starting to read the laws that our governments are passing at 3 a.m. in the morning without any consideration for any other person that those laws affect. And they're beginning to share the truth about those laws, the absolute disgusting nature of them. For instance, here in Queensland, our Premier has now changed the law so that it's not the Chief Health Officer who's in charge of whether there's a pandemic or not. That decision will be made by CEOs of councils. These are people who have no medical training whatsoever.
Yes.
And most of the population believe that they're quite hopeless at managing an office. They're certainly not good at budgets, except for filling their own pockets. I realise that's a fairly disparaging viewpoint. However, I am a little skeptical of them. And you know, the head of the beast, so to speak, is definitely making itself far more obvious. And the tighter they squeeze, the more people are starting to wake up.
Yeah, 100% right, brother. And I think what you're talking about, resistance happening at a local community level, is so vital.
So vital.
Yeah, I remember I was I've been to Syria a number of times alongside Mairead Maguire, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in Ireland for her work there, the Peace People. And she said to me that I remember she taught me that she said, we've got to make change at the top level, but it's got to gel at the bottom level as well, at the grassroots, with women's groups, with community-based groups, with this sort of thing. It's, if it doesn't happen there, what changes at the top won't last. They won't take hold. And I think that's the same here. We need to see, like I say, the prophet, the priest, and the king. It needs to work at different levels in different ways. And we need change, pushing for change at the top. But we also need that solid community base, to make it work.
Father Dave, they've just recently come out, well, they've been doing it for a little while, but they're starting to really push now the whole one world religion and really but they're not doing it in such a way that is a coming together and an understanding of all different religions. This is a real push to make sure that everybody comes under a one world religion. Do you actually think that?
I think that sounds disastrous.
Do you think it's actually going to wake a lot more people up?
Look, I think there's a lot of people think, interfaith is about pretending that all our faiths are the same. They're not.
They're not
with my Muslim sisters and brothers, the beauty of it is not pretending that we all agree on everything. It's recognizing that there's certain things we're miles apart on, but we love each other anyway. There are certain things we believe very strongly together, issues of justice, and liberty and fairness and things like this, which we're in total agreement on, where we can work together 100%. That's not to say we have to agree on everything. So there's a lot of what you see going under that sort of banner of interfaith work is just about minimalizing your religious beliefs and looking for the lowest common denominator and saying basically we're all the same. My approach and what I tried to advocate in the book is not to say that. Say, look, we have there's a lot we do agree on and where we can work together. There's other points where we disagree. We listen, we disagree, we move forward as friends, we work together. And that's a different approach to the one you're talking about. It's not looking for the lowest common denominator and pretend we can just sort of make a mixture and that'll all be very comfortable and, which just leads to mediocrity.
I think the principle you might be getting at here was once described by a chippy a couple of thousand years ago. I call him a chippy. Other people might call him a carpenter. I think he said, love. I think he might have said, "Love thy neighbor as thyself."
Absolutely. But that's where I get my inspiration for this approach from, because I think that's the approach which Jesus took. You see him speaking with all sorts of people who he doesn't share the same ideas about God necessarily with, but he talks, he engages, and he moves forward with them. I mean, it's interesting when you think of Jesus, the only people he really had problems with were the really rich and the really religious. Everybody else he was really cool with.
Hence your statements, it might not be in the answers may not be in the structured, organized church.
Well, I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing a remarkable movement of the Spirit of God at the grassroots. But I think that needs to be nurtured as well, and that's where if I've got a role, I think it's trying to support and nurture people in that capacity.
Well, I don't think you'll get any arguments from anyone here. When we first started TAP, I had people come to me and say, "You've got to stop talking about God. You've got to stop talking about God. You'll get the people interested if you stop talking about God."
Yeah.
Let me tell you, we refused. We will not stop talking about God. We open, often we will open and sometimes even close our TAP executive meetings with a prayer. And we ask for the spirit of revelation and prophecy to be there with us so that we can find our way forwards in this confusing world.
Which is it's remarkable, brother. I mean, I've been asked to open in prayer at so many of these meetings. It's just unprecedented in this country. We don't open in prayer, for God's sake. We're Australia, you know what I mean? But all of a sudden, something's happened, and there's a new awareness and a rising spirituality. It's profound and inspiring.
When I first joined TAP, I'd obviously for a long time kind of never lost my faith, but definitely moved away. I lost my mother. She was 47 when she died, so I was quite young. And I was quite angry because she was a very spiritual woman of the church and did a lot for the deaf people in the church with sign languages. And I remember I moved away a lot and I
Mhm.
just stopped going to church and whatnot. And I must admit, when I first joined TAP and I noticed they did that, I thought, oh, that's a bit different. And I noticed throughout this last 3 years, really, of everything that's been happened, that a lot of people, and especially in America, they're very strong in their faith. It certainly allowed me to come back and have a much stronger faith again than what I had in the sort of preceding 20 years since, or I think it's been 30 years now since my mother's been gone. So yeah, so that's kind of been I guess the thing that I hold on to now. So yeah,
God bless you.
yeah. Well, guys, we are out of time. Is there any last questions that you'd like to ask Father Dave before we wrap up tonight's session? It's been absolutely enlightening having you on, Father Dave.
I'm so sorry it's finishing. I'm just getting warmed up. This is great.
We'll just have to have you on again.
Look, I'm excited. I'm excited the idea that Kemp might join me out in the bush. I'm really excited about that. I'm hoping Kim and you might too, Ainsley, but I'd love to get you guys involved in the Sunday Eucharist as well, and just see if we can develop that as a resource for people, a spiritual resource for people. You know, that's where I see my own calling in this process at the moment.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see what we can do with that, Father Dave, because
God bless you, sister.
and yeah, it's always you know, people really are looking, and particularly you're right now, people really are looking, and going within is the key for all of that. So anything or resource material or any guidance in being able to share that with people, I think would be brilliant.
Thank you.
There
Thank
go.
you. Good look, God bless you guys. Honestly, it's such an inspiration to see you guys in action. And you know, I think for so many of us, when this all started, we felt totally isolated.
Mm.
You know, I think that's some of those suicides are just feeling so alone.
Mm.
You know, I remember when the first lockdown came, and I'd planned to get away with my daughter, you know, because I was being pushed out of the church. We were going to go for a holiday at SeaWorld, and all of a sudden all the borders were shut, you know, and it was just, I didn't know how to cope, and I felt so alone. And then you realize you're not alone. There's a lot of other people there standing with you. And then people like yourself rise up and you speak out and you form, you know, and it's inspiring. And I'm deeply grateful to you.
We're grateful that you came onto our show, Father Dave. I'm sure we will have to do it again. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed tonight's show, we will get the replay up as quickly as possible. If you would like to follow any of the videos that we're doing, they are up on our YouTube channel, on our website, theaustraliaproject.org, and they are on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TripleTap. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time on Triple Tap. Bye for now.
Good night,
God bless you.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night.